Welcome to another edition of the Rudy Reyes Show. I'm your host, Rudy Reyes, right here on the Two Live Stews Radio Network. I am Facebook Live. You can find me on Spreaker as well. I'm here for an hour discussing all things sports with you, just in case you haven't wondered what previews lay ahead of the regular season for the NFL. Well, today is your very lucky day. I'm not a superstitious guy, and I don't really believe in luck or anything like that, so you can take it for what it's worth. Teams couldn't become even much luckier, if there's such a thing, this year than they were last year. Are those teams even more prepared in not only acquiring the talent they need to play the game by some additions, subtractions, and for those who feel will be the difference makers? Will there be those? Will you see those on display all season? Who will start, who will not? We're not talking fantasy, we're talking reality. I'll say fantasy for another show. Make sure to bring my glitter and sprinkle some over my head or something. Maybe I'll call in a fairy. Oh wait, that's open interpretation. Never mind. Look, if you want the best as an NFL team, you really have to put these players through a test to ensure resiliency, cohesion, athleticism, and being of solid character collectively play a role in whatever team they bring those components to. We are who we say we are. Not to mention the actions to follow. Sometimes a player can sell you on a falsehood, but to be able to see right through it is the deal, and that's why scouts get paid, to see through the muck, to see through the lies or deceitfulness. And that's certainly what is available in today's NFL. When you can see right through it, you're an experienced scout. When you can recognize the goods from the bads, you're doing your job. Will this particular player work for your team? I don't know. Do you understand your team's culture? Do you understand what your team is looking for? Have you fully invested your time in understanding the team's reality, the dichotomy, the system? Are you aware of it? Do you know? A lot of scouts predominantly throughout the year will make their trek to all these various colleges throughout the United States and sometimes beyond, maybe in the CFL, to find the talent that they believe their team is looking for. Asking the right questions will achieve the right results. What you're looking for. What are the team's future plans? What positions are they looking to fill? What kind of guys are they looking for at those positions? There's a plethora of questions that are associated with what these teams are looking for. How viable will they be moving forward into any given NFL season? Is this player involved in future plans for this particular franchise? But any players out there who believe they can plant a smokescreen over somebody else's eyes, the scout, the general manager, the head coach, and even co-workers on the field, will be found out certainly one way or another, albeit the team itself, the NFL, because somehow along the way they will slip. However, some NFL teams have overlooked the likelihood that a player who has seemingly committed a crime, we're talking NCAA, this is again part of the scouts, it's their job, their position, and they need to commit to it and realize what type of history this particular player is associated with. Are they addicted to party, abuse, verbal, physical, any assaults on the record? And in some cases, all the above. Sadly enough, a lot of these guys do get overlooked and end up in the NFL just to find themselves out of a job after being there in the NFL. Randy Gregory, Josh Brown. Were they that way the whole time, or were they just found out in the NFL because they made a slip? Were they like that in their college years? Again, great scouting will achieve the results you're looking for because these guys are committed. Yeah, they're only getting paid $50,000 a year, but what does that really mean? Does that mean because you're only getting paid $50,000 a year that you can skim and just go over the numbers with your respective general manager or owner and say, you know what, this is exactly what we're looking for. I think we should give them an opportunity. Well, these people trust you. They believe that you're going to be unbiased. You're going to see through the smokescreen, see through the lies, see through the backlog of issues and situations that they have put themselves in to where they're at right now. I don't mince words here. Not about topics like this. If you're an NFL team and you have scouts out there, make sure they are doing their job. Because teams will base it on a scout and what their thoughts are, how they see the player. Not for what they really are. Well, what happened to the DUI? Oh, I don't know anything about that. You must not have mentioned it. No, you didn't do your job. That's what it is. And unfortunately, NFL teams will look past it. Maybe they fired the scout. I don't know. They'll make the determination as to whether or not this particular player is viable in their system and try as hard as they can to overlook those situations, those issues, DUIs, DWIs, abuse records, assault, fights in bars. There's all types of things. Grego, yes, welcome. I'm live here on Spreaker as well. Feel free to chat. I'm right here on the Two Life News Radio Network on Spreaker. This is Rudy Reyes on the Root Dog Show. Feel free to chat, send me a message. Facebook Live also works for that as well, just in case you didn't know. But when you're working with these particular experts, and feel free to ask any questions if you're in the chat room here on the Two Life News Radio Network, or on Facebook, or on Twitter. For that matter, I get to those questions as well. But when you're an NFL team, you make sure that you do your due diligence, and scouts will bounce from one team to the next team to the next team to the next team because of an error they made at the team prior. And they're called, well, at least so-called experts. And when I say experts, I'll leave that to people that have actually went, and I don't mean a scout. I'm not knocking scouts, but what I'm saying is that when you acquire these types of players, because they're out there. They're all out there. Your Manziels will show up at any given draft. Your Randy Gregory's will show up. Your Ezekiel Elliott's will show up. And I'm not using them as an example because they've already set the example for themselves and for others to look at and say, oh, well, that's not good. But if you're going to acquire these players, have something put in position. I'm talking to you, NFL. I'm talking to you, NFL teams. Get the right experts in your individual franchise to say, you know what, we need somebody who is an expert. We need somebody who is schooled in sports psychology. We need somebody to aid in our efforts to make sure that the types of players that we are looking for are those that are not going to cause any issues while they're here. Are they going to be good in the locker room? Well, that's one thing you check on your list. Will they? Let's see. Let me make my notation. And setting them up not to fail by having the right pieces in position. I've talked about this on the show before. At least a dozen times. But ultimately, that situation, which can last for a lifetime if they're certainly not adjusted, spoken about, talked to help become corrected before they move on to the next professional echelon of their career, could haunt you for a lifetime if they're not corrected. If you recognize, if you're a student athlete, and I'm talking to you, and you need help to cope with whatever ails you, regardless of what it is, ask for help. Regardless of what it is. Because by ignoring it can make matters much worse. And if you believe that a multi-million-dollar contract in the NFL will make your problems go away, you are dead wrong. You need even more help. So use your money wisely and get the help you need now, not later. And this was my rant, but a very relevant one, I might add. Let's talk even more about performance because, as you know, in your respective position, albeit the NFL, the CFL, the NCAA, among many others, is essential. You would not eat right, work on cardio, much less not prepare in a variety of ways to diminish what you have worked so hard to gain. Annually, you're receiving your possible replacement, and in the NFL, regardless of your position, your team is relying upon you as the heir apparent, as the starter. Year after year after year, if you're not performing to the possible best, to your best, regardless of what position it is on the field, you will lose your spot. Right now, there's a battle between Cody Sensabaugh, who's brought in from the Tennessee Titans, to Ross Cockrell. They're battling for the starting position opposite of Artie Burns. Cody Sensabaugh has shown much more to me than Ross Cockrell lost on coverage. Feel free to chat right here in the chat room. I will not avoid confrontation. If you disagree, chime in. Please. Most of the time, players will show up to camp ready to rock and roll. They're ready to get their work on. When I say work on, I don't mean some menial amount of, well, I came in, I'm 100 pounds under. Well, where's the muscle? Where's the mass? Where's the speed? Where's the cardio? Where's the footwork? Where's the hand work? Where's the hand-eye coordination? If you're an offensive lineman, you want to make sure you get your pancakes in. I mean that literally and figuratively and on the field. Sure, you have an offensive line coach for that. That's great. But if you come in out of shape, what do you expect is going to happen? You're going to get handled at the line. You're going to get handled by a wide receiver. You're going to get handled by a tight end. They're going to show you that they deserve that spot, and you don't. Why? Because you do not come prepared. It's about performance. That's what the NFL is all about. It means not for long. And if you don't show up, you won't be there for long. Let's dive into today's topic. Not only a list, that's in order, of course, that's the way I like to do things, of what is good in the AFC North with a list of participants who will be bidding for the crown in the 2017 NFL season. I know you're waiting for that. Feel free to chime in, drop in. It's Rudy Reyes on the Rude Dog Show, the Two Lights News Radio Network. I'll be here for another 47 minutes. Let's look at the year that was in 2016 when the Baltimore Ravens versus the Pittsburgh Steelers not only made it an exciting one in the AFC North, I was excited. Christmas Day, opening up gifts. All I wanted was the Steelers to beat the Ravens. That was it. Bottom line, had my jersey on, I was ready to go. And no, I didn't have a radio show that day. I don't do Christmas Day radio shows, sorry. Unless the Steelers go to the Super Bowl, you will not hear me on any given holiday season, because that in itself is a holiday. At least that's how I look at it. But I'll tell you this much, it's going to be another exciting one. It could very well boil down to the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers headed into an AFC North battle. But they're not the only ones. Oh, contraire, mon frère. The NFL in itself, here in the AFC North, when I say here, I mean because that's, the team I cheer for happens to be in the AFC North. It's going to be a battle to see who's going to make it. Last year was about who made the 1 seed, who made the 6 seed, who had the longer road. Steelers been the 6 seed before, went on to win in Super Bowl 40. But I'm not counting out other teams. I'm just merely stating that last year was the year. It was not to be later on when the Steelers lost an AFC Championship game against the New England Patriots. But I have a little Christmas story for you, something that I had thought up back then to go back. It was Christmas Eve and all through the house. No Steeler was seen leaving, not even a mouse. While the Ravens were tucked all snugly in their beds, a dream of an AFC North Championship danced through their heads. The very next day, despite the dreams of winning the North, it was not in the cards for the Ravens. It made it very exciting to watch, however, But when you have a guy by the name of Antonio Brown who's on the field who certainly finds a way to get the ball past the end zone, understanding where he is at, gets the winning touchdown, that says a lot for Antonio Brown. It says a lot for the resilience of the Steelers that could have gone either way in that particular matchup. But when you pass the goal line, that was the Steelers' touchdown. There's no doubt about that one. Well, I look forward to a very similarly exciting year. Both of these teams will put on a championship-type show during the regular season, and I expect both teams to battle it out again this year. But if you want intense, you're in the right division. If you want an AFC North rivalry, you're in for it. This could very well be the game to watch to see who enters the playoffs. Now, I'm not counting out the Cincinnati Bengals because they're pesky and scrappy in this division as well. Maybe even the Browns, despite the solid draft, will have some takeaways, at least for the 19th starting quarterback. That is something that Joe Thomas decided to rattle off, which is mind-blowing in of itself. But he'll be facing his 19th quarterback under center this year. It could be Deshaun Kaiser. It could be Brock Osweiler. Now, interesting fact about Brock Osweiler, the Browns were trying to shop him off to an NFL team. And to their dismay, were not able to do because of the heavy price tag Brock Osweiler comes with. For this upcoming game, Deshaun Kaiser has been named the starter in this preseason matchup. He is a starter, yes, but will he play the entire game? I guess we'll have to find out. He could share the time with Brock Osweiler as well. Maybe even some Kessler. Put down the bottom. Some of the questions on fans' mind are, will the Browns find their identity this year? Maybe. Is it offensively? Is it defensively? Will they find a way to win? Will they even be remotely contentious in the AFC North this year? And possibly, will the draft produce the desired results to turn this unsettled franchise into a contender and blow everybody's minds up? The thunder rolls. Look, I'm not quite convinced that the Browns are for real. Well, at least not quite yet. Hugh Jackson does have the poise to grab more wins, and the winning moments of games will possibly go to weapons like John Ross. And for everybody who doesn't know who John Ross is, one of the fastest man drafted in the 2017 NFL draft. He could be used as special teams, maybe in the slot. We'll have to find out. He's not exactly a tall guy, but he's physical enough and he's fast enough. We're going to see that happen. Possibly Myles Garrett on the other side of the ball, who's a natural born disruptor while at Texas A&M. He'll make his presence known this year. There's no doubt about it. To open up the season against one of the best offensive lines, not only in the AFC North, but in the NFL. And as a side note, there was some conversation during the regular season during the post-draft conversations, about how he can't wait to sack Ben Roethlisberger. He's going to have his hands full. He's an interior guy, but if the preseason is any indicator that this Steelers team is going to allow sacks on Ben Roethlisberger, that remains to be seen. We'll find out what Myles Garrett looks like against every other AFC team. He may have some luck against the Bengals and could very well have some luck against the Ravens as well, considering the quarterback situation is not exactly solid right now. I think the Browns are better off using Osweiler as a quarterback, at least for the moment. Why? Because they need to make sure that they get the right guy in the right position, and I think that's who you're going to find. I like Brock Osweiler a little bit. I like Deshaun Kaiser a little bit more. I like Deshaun Kaiser because he's faster. He has a quicker release. He's smarter in the pocket. He makes a lot of right decisions. I'm sorry, John Ross, for correction purposes, is a Bengal. So my mistake there. But I look forward to the Cleveland Browns as they were one of the biggest laughing stocks in the league. And it's easy to see when you look at all the miscues that they've had. The 18 starting quarterback, a lot of lackluster defensive efforts, pick sixes, interruptions in the front line, pressures on quarterbacks. I think you can probably call them the laughing stock in the NFL, at least in the AFC North, for a very long time, sadly enough. But I think that when you look at this offensive line against the Steelers' defensive line, and we don't know who the starters are yet, as aforementioned, Ross Cockrell's battling out Cody Sensabaugh for the quarterback opposite of Artie Burns this year. I'm a Sensabaugh fan. Yeah, most people did forget about John Ross, by the way, Grego. You're right. You're absolutely right. I think when you look at the Browns, you look at Hugh Jackson, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't think Hugh Jackson would have a job coming back this year. Why? Because the Cleveland Browns formally have locked themselves out of getting the right coaches because the system doesn't allow for good coaches to come in and stay. That's the sad part. That's the sad thing. But I think when you look at all the issues, the quarterback issues and problems, the Browns were probably considering, and I've called them the A-minus, probably one of the best, the second best draft franchises in the NFL draft. Why? Because they acquired a lot of great guys, not only there, but in free agency. But I think it's going to take a little bit more time and patience to get this into perspective, to really realize where the Browns are, who they really are, to see if we find out what their identity becomes in front of us as it unfolds throughout the regular season. Do the Browns have a chance to blow everybody's minds apart? I don't know about this year, but they certainly have been building for quite some time. Are they going to be the same old Browns? As far as the offseason, from what I've seen defensively, no. The Browns look a lot better, a lot more pressures, a lot more sacks. And I know it's vanilla, I know it's soft, I get it, I understand. I've been down this road before. But I think the Browns, because of the quarterback situation they have to deal with between Kessler, Osweiler, and Deshaun Kaiser, I think that this is something that's unprecedented for them. They haven't had this good situation to be in for some time. I think a winning record may be in line after going 1-5 last year, but Cleveland seems to be a team that I probably wouldn't take too lightly. I probably would suggest that in this year you could see some surprise wins against maybe even the Steelers, maybe the Ravens, and even the Bengals. So we're certainly going to find out how that is. This is Rudy Reyes on the Rude Dog Show on the Two Lives News Radio Network. Feel free to chat. I'm here on Twitter right now. Let's see what message there is in regards to if anybody is listening at all, and they are not listening on Twitter. But you can certainly interact with me on Twitter as well, just in case the chat room is a little crowded. People need elbow room, you know. Anyway, my number 3, because I'm going down, starting at 4, working my way to 1, is the Baltimore Ravens. They seem to have been on their way to the AFC North title last season, as we were talking about earlier right here on the Rude Dog Show. But the Ravens are looking for some type of redemption status against the Steelers. But right now, when you look at the starting quarterback situation, it isn't very favorable for them, considering Flacco's dealing with a lower herniated disc. And I know you've heard John Harbaugh and how the time frame for him to play is, September 10th, and you've heard all the fancy schmancy stuff, but in reality, a herniated disc does not allow for him to play, and I don't think he's going to be ready for week 1. And what's going to be even more interesting is to see who ends up getting the start. The guy from the AFL who played 5 total snaps get a start? I have serious issues with the quarterback situation and offensively. But despite how dominant this Ravens defense has been in preseason, they're going to need a lot more than that. A lot more than that. Offensively, the weapons for them have been, well, okay. Steve Smith was acquired, and yes, they picked up Jeremy Maclin from Kansas City, who's a free agent acquisition, and that's great. But that's not the end-all for the Baltimore Ravens. I think they're going to have to really get Mike Wallace involved and is Mike Wallace the same guy that he burnt the Steelers on a few occasions last year during the regular season and one in the postseason. But they need a lot more than that. Look, when you're on the defensive side of the ball, you're wanting to make sure that the guys on the offensive side of the ball are going to take their job as well. Unfortunately, I don't know that that's the case. Is their offensive efficiency going to equalize their defensive efficiency? That remains to be seen. I would like to think that the Baltimore Ravens would be much better offensively, but because of what they didn't do in free agency to acquire the guys that they need, unlike the Cleveland Browns, getting those people in position to receive balls from whoever is under center. The offensive line is okay at best, and you could also have the debate as to whether or not Joe Flacco deserves consideration and to be dubbed an elite quarterback. And I think that, unfortunately, draws more attention than who the starter is going to be in Week 1. Historically, others have pinned the Ravens at being a look-alike team to the hated AFC North rivals, Steelers. Of course, Baltimore and the aforementioned Ozzie Newsome hasn't really done the best through free agency as of late, despite landing Steve Smith. But when it comes to not offering reliable weapons for Flacco to work with, I think that the guy under center, whoever the quarterback's going to be, is going to have a really tough time getting that ball upfield. He's going to have situational offense on every single down. That's not going to pose very favorable for anybody who's under center for the Baltimore Ravens right now. I just don't see it. The defensive looks of this year's Ravens can only put the fear into those other teams trying to carry out the feat with proper support from their teammates. Again, offensively. I think even Jeremy Maclin must admit that at this point, despite who's under center, is he going to have a stellar year that he did in 2015? 2016 was not very favorable for him as he's seen even less receptions. I think that's one of the reasons why Kansas City was trying to run him out, is because they had a lot of up-and-coming talents. And, of course, you've seen a lot of tight ends and Kelsey involved in that tight end throwing process. So we're going to find out what Kansas City is made of. We're going to go through the AFC week starting Tuesday. Have some good stuff for you on Tuesday in accordance with Wednesday, Thursday, and then we'll go through the week and see what comes. This is Rudy Reyes right here on the Rude Dog Show on the Two Life News Radio Network. Thank you for tuning in. I have about 30 minutes left here, but I want to go over a couple more teams you might be aware of in the AFC North, not named the Ravens or the Browns. Let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. And I look at the Bengals, and there's one thing that really sticks out to me about the Bengals, other than the fact that Marvin Lewis has no business being there, is the defensive hurt-ons. When I say hurt-ons, I mean guys who are willing to take out a player just because they can. Not to tackle the guy. We're talking going at the knees, at the rib cage, at the head, tear up the ACLs, all types of other things. Dirty play comes to mind. But when I look at the Bengals and I look at their streak of 5 playoff appearances in a row, it's probably a little consolation. I think it's a consolation prize. They were denied in 2016. I call it an implosion. I think the Cincinnati Bengals took a step back in 2016 by only winning 6 games. The blame games, you can be pointed anywhere you want to go, and they need to find a solution would have helped them by not pointing fingers. So instead of pointing fingers at where the problem is, make sure that you create the solution before you point to whoever the issue is. The blame game has begun, at least in 2016. They don't win this year, where does the fingers point? It's going to point straight on to Marvin Lewis. Why he's still there is beyond me. Why the Cincinnati Bengals have given him more opportunities than I have to wash dishes with is also beyond me. I can tell you that there were plenty of reasons as to why the Bengals failed to live up to playoff expectations. But I call Marvin Lewis and his squad, all things considered, they were only missing a few pieces, but should really find themselves back in contention if you're only looking at the loaded offense Andy Dalton has to work with. I have my reserves about Dalton's ability to not freeze under pressure. It reminds me of another redheaded Cincinnati Bengals quarterback, Carson Palmer. Dalton is heading into his 7th season, and I think they're going to find themselves in very similar situations. That offensive line was playing okay in the regular season, and then all of a sudden, they just fell apart and committed penalties, unnecessary penalties. When you look at the receiving core, you have guys like A.J. Green. I think people are more afraid to face him in a one-on-one situation than probably anybody else on that roster. There are a few exceptions to that rule, of course, but very few. I think the former Georgia standout wide receiver could be very well the last player any opponent would want to face, but when you take into consideration Cincinnati had 2 more playmakers, John Ross, to your point, Grego, and Joe Mixon. I like Joe Mixon despite his issues. Again, the whole preface to this was to talk about the players' issues, players' problems that these NFL teams seem to, I don't know whether it's a gravitational field, whether it's a pull. I know we had an eclipse. Was it that kind of situation where some of these teams say, you know what, we're going to bypass all the negative stuff. We're going to just kind of mosey on down to pick up guys like Joe Mixon and nothing but issues while in college. But they seem to pick up that speedy punt returner, possible slot receiver in John Ross. I think this offense can be very fun to watch overall. However, and here's where the however begins, especially for Cincinnati Bengals, who continue to have a conversation surrounding, well, we want to be there in the playoffs. Okay, good. But are your actions going to back up what you're saying? Is that legitimate? So if the Bengals somehow find themselves being in the playoff conversation, but experience the same year, same season, same situation, same player mentality in some respects, it may finally come time for the Bengals front office to finally call a spade a spade. Marvin Lewis is who they thought they were when they hired him. It's a serious decision, folks. We're not talking about just firing your agent. I'm talking about letting a head coach go. Marvin Lewis is 0-7 in the playoffs. Does anybody not realize that? And in all fairness, looking at it from a different perspective and the losing percentage over the winning percentage for the Cincinnati Bengals, why does Marvin Lewis even have a job? I'm still struggling with that myself. If I was the Bengals front office and I had the ability to let him go, he would have been gone already. There are plenty of up-and-coming coaches that would love to take a job in the AFC North to face off against the Steelers, Ravens, and Browns. But for some reason, Cincinnati front office says, you know, we want to give you another shot. We want to give you another opportunity. We want to give you the tools and the weapons, not that they don't do it every single year. You're in, you're out, you're in, you're out. I think Marvin Lewis is more likely on the outside looking in of having a job next year, especially if this season goes awry. That's the worst part about it. Is that when you look at Marvin Lewis and you look at the mentality of these players and forcing themselves from a negative yardage standpoint, penalizing yourself defensively and not getting it to the guys offensively that you need to get to in crucial third down, third long situations, you really have to look at Marvin Lewis. I mean, it really boils down to what he does or does not do. Are all these players buying what he's selling? I think it's unwarranted. I think the amount of chances he's been given is also unwarranted. Had he have pulled off a Mike Martz or a Jeff Fisher situation where at least Jeff Fisher has a championship, or Mike Sosha for the Angels has a championship, that's why he's still there. A lot of coaches, at least they have that win. Tony Dungy, same thing there. Former longtime Steeler. Longtime Indianapolis Colts head coach. won a championship. He said, I'll get my championship ring and I'm out of here. They all do very same things. They want their ring and they're gone. Or they retire. Thank you for tuning in live here on Facebook. Also chatting right here on the Two Live Studios Radio Network, on Spreaker, on Twitter. Somebody asked me a question, would you? Just kidding. Well, no, I'm not kidding. I'm kind of kidding, but not really kidding. So I think you could be in for some changes in the 2018 season for the Cincinnati Bengals, especially Marvin Lewis cannot get these guys over the hump. If you can't get them to winning grounds, you have no business being there. End of story. I don't care what position you play. I don't care what team you're on. I don't care what association you're in. It doesn't matter. Win and you're in. You lose and you snooze in the unemployment line when you don't have a job. And of course, at number one, the runner-up in the AFC Championship game, nobody remembers that, right? Nobody remembers number two, especially AFC Championship game conversations. But prior to the start of the last season, the Steelers, their own expectations, individual expectations, joint expectations, ownership expectations were very high for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I consider the offense to be probably one of the best in the NFL. I don't know who else would, you dare to disagree. Okay, fine. So they're on top three for receptions. Antonio Brown comes to mind. Eli Rogers comes to mind. Even Ladarius Green, in his very mild appearance for the Steelers, found a way to make some critical first downs. But I look how talented this team is. Things are starting to come together. I had Chris Adamski on, who covers the Pittsburgh Steelers for Trib Live and covers the Pirates and the Penguins. I think more so the Pirates and Steelers than the Penguins. But me and Chris were talking about how the marker and time frame for Le'Veon Bell to return will help this team statistically, from a numerical standpoint, will also show that the Steelers themselves, despite struggling at times to prevent other teams from taking advantage. And look, bottom line is this. When you have teams in the NFL that have found ways to win in the past, that come from a winning franchise, a winning mentality, winning attitude, to have a guy by the name of Le'Veon Bell, aforementioned, to shatter records, especially against the Bills. I watched that game very attentively as the snow was coming down in certain parts of the game. But I think that sometimes when you look at the Steelers, they're a slow starting team. They don't start off 5-0, 6-0, 7-0. It takes a little bit of time to get the wheels turning, and they found a way to do that last year at 11-5 in the final other half of the regular season. I think they stepped it up when they needed to. They got the first downs when they needed to. No Martavis Bryant. That changes a little bit. Of course, with the draft with Juju Smith-Schuster, who hopefully will be playing this Saturday against the Colts, I think to myself that this could be probably one of the best offenses in the NFL outside of what Tom Brady has to work with, being 40 years old. Could the Steelers find a way to win the AFC North title? Absolutely can. Is this Ben Roethlisberger's last year? It's possible. It's very possible. Why? Talked about it yesterday. It's been an ongoing theme in some shows that I've hosted. But I look at Ben Roethlisberger, and Father Time will destroy you. He will take you apart piece by piece, brick by brick. The only way Ben Roethlisberger will not have an issue, which he's had historically throughout his career as a starting quarterback for the Steelers, is somehow he will find a way to get injured or roll up on an offensive lineman, a guard. Somebody will roll up on him, and then there goes a hamstring. It never fails. It just seems to be one of those ongoing situations for the Steelers. But there's nothing more than, for me, from my perspective, when I look at this team and I look at all the weaponry, I look at the defense, I look at this battle in the secondary between Sensabaugh and Cockrell and Alawalu in free agency, who was picked up, and despite the departure of Lawrence Timmons headed over to Miami, I think when you look at the Steelers' defense, they have to apply pressure early and often, put some exotic stuff in there, and get Stephon Tuitt signed in. When I say signed, I mean for long term, because there's still plenty of money in cap for the Pittsburgh Steelers to get Stephon Tuitt in a long-term deal. But for defensive linemen, yeah, you're right. Father Time's undefeated. He always will be. But you know what really surprises me? Whenever I hear that, whenever I see that, whenever I see somebody having the conversation about Father Time being undefeated, Father Time is undefeated. Don't tell that to James Harrison on the other side of the ball. The guy spends $300,000 a year on 4 or 5 different doctors. He has a couple of masseuses, an orthopedist. There's a variety. There's a variety of things that guy does to stay young. Also headed to the 40-yard marker. He'll be there before Ben Roethlisberger is, I can tell you that much. But is this James Harrison's last season as well? When you think about a guy, we were talking about Father Time being undefeated, does he go down? Is he going to play second fiddle to T.J. Watt, who is in a world of his own with plenty of pressures and sacks to go along with it, and just in the preseason? He doesn't even have all the upfront tools and the solid linebacker rotation that the Steelers have to make their presence known at any given down. Good afternoon, Mo Cabell, Cedric Galloway, Kesey. I can't type it, but I'm going to say it. Thank you for all joining here on Spreaker, on the Root Dog Show, on the Two Light Stews Radio Network. And thanks for joining, chat, hello, and all that good stuff. I look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think to myself, this has got to be Ben's final year. Is it really his final year? He's been saying that for years already. 3 or 4 years have gone out where he said, I think I'm going to retire. But chew on this. And this is something that I had asked Chris Adamski about, in that the CTE report shows that 47%, if not more, of former NFL players find themselves out of the NFL with serious CTE issues after football. A lot of players are also, Plunkett is one of them. After multiple surgeries, he finds himself basically alone. Is it depression? Is it an issue? Well, CTE is a serious problem. And if Ben Roethlisberger wants to stay in it, he's going to have to be protected very, very well and pay these guys even more money. It's money and incentive. You're darn right it is. It needs to be. But if you want to keep Ben Roethlisberger upright, that offensive line has to play absolutely stellar on every single down there on the field. Every single down. It's the only way you're going to keep Ben Roethlisberger upright. End of story. And of course, he's, there's been some words here between Roethlisberger and Tomlin. I'm sure the organization as well. And, he's on his way, but the window is closing for him fast. I think he will find a way to win another championship before his window closes. But that's a big question. That's a big, big question. Would 2017 be his final year? It wouldn't surprise me because of the conversations that he has with life, because of looking at all the viable statistical information that's available to anybody, even myself, as I had mentioned earlier, along with other people that he can get a second opinion, a third opinion, a fourth opinion, however opinions you want. If he wants to continue playing, the offensive line has to do a stellar job keeping him upright, bottom line. But I think another Super Bowl victory would certainly solidify Ben Roethlisberger's presence. But when you look at the present, speaking of presence, last year was a present, not that kind of presence, not plural, it was singular. Last year, Steelers traveled a lot. Their season was probably one of the highest, and again, not to sound redundant, but Steelers have always had a high percentage season. In other words, they faced very tough battles on the interior, on the exterior, offensively, defensively, last year. They were one of the most well-traveled teams in the NFL. Unfortunately, for teams like the Raiders, the Cardinals, the Rams, the Dolphins, and Chargers, find themselves on the top 5 list of having to travel very far. And that's not where the Steelers are at. That's not where they're going to be. They're not going to be on the road a lot. They're going to be relatively local. New York, Philadelphia. They're going to find themselves in a situation where they don't have to travel very far. So those wins the recovery time, the ice buckets, the ice showers, the rehabilitation process is not as strenuous in accordance with trying to fly here or flying there or doing this or doing that in a long distance type situation. But I think when you look at the signs for the Steelers team, who they have, who they don't have, waiting to see what Martavis Bryant is going to do. As I mentioned, we had Chris Adamski here on the Root Dog Show yesterday talking about Martavis Bryant and his usage in this offense. And I see a lot of similar characteristics for these Steelers, and here's why. You have Martavis Bryant back, who's on the opposite side of where Antonio Brown is, so you're lining them up. You have Eli Rogers, who's going to be in the slot. You no longer have Marcus Wheaton. He traveled on. He went over to Chicago, now injuring his finger, which is preventing him from playing, at least up to this point, to my understanding. I think there's more of a different look on both sides of the ball. Offensively with Martavis Bryant, along with having Alualu, regardless of who starts, I think that Cody Sensabaugh is doing a much better job from a starting standpoint and is a lot more ball aware than I think Ross Cockrell is. Ross Cockrell not the fastest guy on the field. I think Cody Sensabaugh can certainly beat him out. I'm trying to get Cody Sensabaugh here on the Root Dog Show before he enters the regular season for the Steelers. So look out for that one right here on the Root Dog Show on the Two Lights Stews Radio Network. But I think regardless of who's starting for the Steelers, and of course I expect Ryan Shazier, who could see some playing time Saturday against the Colts. Ben's going to start. Harrison's going to start. Antonio Brown will start. And I think depending on the production, perhaps, in the preseason for this starting aforementioned players, I think you may see them go out a little bit earlier than you would expect. Again, these are meaningless games. All these are designed to do is to get players the reps. We were talking about quarterbacks yesterday and whether or not Bert Houston will find his way in the starting rotation. And unfortunately, despite it leading the Steelers down in the red zone against the Atlanta Falcons at home, he won't make it. And that's a shame because I like Bart Houston. I like the underdog guy being a walk-on. Unfortunately, because Landry Jones is still there dealing with abdominal strain himself, may see time in a vanilla-type defense. And there's no real coaching going on. Don't let this preseason thing really get under your skin. There isn't a whole lot to it. Everybody's just playing. Just to play. Everybody's having their own, not really their own formation, because clearly there has to be some type of designation where you need to be. There's very little play calling, but all this is designed to do is to get people on board and being comfortable and to be able to create a fluidity on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. That's what all this preseason hubbub is about. So once you hear people making these big deals about preseason, it's not really much. It's not really a whole lot of anything. So don't look into it all that much. There's a whole slew of games going on in the preseason. But since we're talking the AFC North, there really isn't an AFC North battle yet to ensue. But I imagine, at least at this point, when I look at the AFC North and the way that I would rank both of these, at least the number one and number two, I think it's going to go Steelers. It's going to go with the Bengals. I think the Bengals become a little bit better this year, offensively as well as defensively, without committing atrocious penalties and to knock players out of their skin. I think the Baltimore Ravens also take a step up, but not enough to make anything, I don't know. They could surprise. Don't forget, you can throw all the records, you can throw the stats, you can throw it all out the window when the Ravens face the Steelers. We've seen it last year. We're going to see it again this year. As long as the AFC North stays what it is, and I don't foresee any type of rotation between breaking it up when it was old AFC Central and reforming all these different leagues and what have you. Look, bottom line is this. Unless you see more teams and some type of expansion in the next 4 or 5 years, maybe, you're not going to see anything different than what you're looking at right now. AFC or the NFC or the NFL as a whole. But I think the Browns still have a way to go. I think the Bengals have a way to go. Ravens certainly have a way to go, at least offensively. I think they're the more complete team from a defensive standpoint. Offensively, they're going to have some serious struggles to contend with, as well as, thank you, Ray, for the share, by the way. Give me a thumbs up for that one. That's a real thumb. That's not social media, though. That's a real thumb. Thanks for sharing. I appreciate it nonetheless. But I think that, look, bottom line for the AFC North, that the Steelers really need to focus in on what they have, focus in on who they have, and really hone in on trying to make sure that they do everything possible. Look, they did it for Jerome Bettis. It was for Jerome. One for the thumb, it was for Jerome. That's exactly why they did it, for what reason they did it. And I think when you look at the Steelers overall, they're the more complete team in the AFC North. Are they most complete team in the NFL? They're on a list. They're on a very short list, but they're on a list nevertheless. And I think the Steelers, when you look at it, when you look at the weaponry, when you look at the play calling, when you look at coaching and things of that nature, they're the more complete team. I think, especially when I look at special teams between Trey Williams returning that touchdown against the Falcons, which was absolutely fantastic. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so high on Trey Williams. I'm high on the special teams aspect of the Steelers, which is the third phase of this team. I think when you look at special teams, they need to be special in the regular season as well. Just because you're hungry and trying to make the roster doesn't mean you turn off the Jets. Well, all of a sudden preseason is over with. You had to turn on the Jets, making the team in special teams anyway. They have a group designated for special teams. They have a group designated for offense and all the players aforementioned, as well as defense with all those players aforementioned. Don't get those two confused. If you want to make the roster and you want to be an impact player and be under consideration for the following year to gain the money that you are looking for from a contractual standpoint, then you have to put the Jets on all the time. You have to work hard all the time because somebody else is always screaming behind you to get your spot. We talked about that earlier here on the show, and I'm just re-emphasizing that so that way you know. I think the Steelers win the AFC North at 11-5. Bengals go 10-6. Ravens go 9-7. And I think that even as much as I was talking about the Browns at the beginning of this broadcast, I think the Browns will go for a 500 season. I think that's where they're at in a 500 season at 8-8. They just have to find out who their quarterback's going to be and stick with them. But if he doesn't work, you got to trade out. You have to do what you have to do. If you're a team and you want to win, you got to put the people in position to get you there. Don't make excuses. Just like Cincinnati Bengals keeping Marvin Lewis, is he the coach that's going to get you there? No, he's not. Don't be confused. There is no misconception. There is no dicing of words. If Marvin Lewis doesn't get it done in Cincinnati this year, to get them to a playoff spot, he is gone. If the Cleveland Browns somehow find a way, maybe they'll continue shopping in the regular season to get rid of Brock Osweiler. Maybe that's what they'll do. And if they do, maybe it's another draft pick to add to their arsenal in next year's draft. Imagine that. I think the Browns go 500, and I think with all the tools, with all the respective pieces they have, there's absolutely no reason why they can't go 8-8. None. They had a much better draft. They have much better personnel. And again, that quarterback situation is only proving very favorable to them right now, at least right now. I think the Browns will find an identity. How much of one remains to be seen, but I think the Browns will certainly find one they can build on. So as long as ownership doesn't tie coach's hands, Hugh Jackson does what he needs to do, what he has to do, what he must do. If they give him that freedom to do that, the Browns will come out of the closet and become the team that eventually, maybe even the past players, like Jim Brown, would take their hat off to and say, good job, kudos to you. But again, this is the Browns, and I'm not giving them super high hopes, but I'm giving them realistic hopes, and I think 8-8 is certainly realistic. lots of other teams in the AFC can probably have that same conversation about, well, where are we going to be next year? Where are we going to be this year? Are we going to be the type of team that's going to love what we do and how we do it? Who are we doing it for? Are we doing it for ourselves? Are we doing it for other players? Are we doing it for us? What are we doing this for? Why are we at 8-8? Well, it's a lot better at 8-8, I can tell you that, than it is 1-15. Or 2-14. I think they can do a lot better. They have to put everything in sync. Everything has to work. But again, Steelers take this out and win the AFC North and become the winners that will go on to the playoffs. I guess the biggest question that I have for the Steelers is whether or not they can get past that New England Patriots hump. Will they do it this year? Will Bill Belichick be outcoached? Will the Steelers be able to do it? Will Mike Tomlin find a way and put the best minds together to come up with a game plan to pick apart the New England passing game? It's not as if they have this stellar, crew of defensemen. No, these guys are no-names. But as much as they're no-names, they're getting it done. They are winners after all, are they not? Well, if the Steelers want to do it, they're going to have to find a way to do it. This is Rudy Reyes right here on the 2 Life Steelers Radio Network. I am on Spreaker, Facebook Live. Feel free to share, comment. But thank you for listening to the show. I have one last little tidbit here. It's something I looked into when I opened up my Twitter machine. And I noticed that in ESPN, Russillo story that just blew my mind. There was some type of illegal entry. I didn't get into the whole story. I didn't have time. I was preparing for my own show. I don't pay a whole lot of attention to everything else that's going on around. But when I seen this, I thought to myself, are you kidding me? And then to have an opportunity to come back into broadcast media after? You think people are going to look up to you? Are they going to respect your opinion? Yeah, there are two sides to every story, but what's his side of the story? Nobody knows. He's not giving it. You're a respected media person, stay respected. Don't disrespect yourself by getting caught up in breaking the law. Not like that. Heck, not even littering for that matter, if you want to go there with it. I just thought I'd throw that out there. This is Rudy Reyes on the Rude Dog Show on the 2 Life Steelers Radio Network. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. I appreciate the chatter. I didn't say cheddar. The chatter in the chat room. Thank you to everybody. Cedric, Kesey, Mocha. I'll return next week. Don't forget, if you're in the Los Angeles area, go see the Los Angeles Scorpions. I will be color commentating that game at the LA Harbor College at 1 p.m. this Saturday, August 26th. Make sure you get your tickets. Go to LosAngelesScorpions.com. Get your tickets and be there. I'll see you there. Have a great day, everyone. This is Rudy Reyes on the Rude Dog Show on the 2 Life Steelers Radio Network. I'll see you later.